All right, so we have Blake Ferguson, former LSU long snapper, on with us for an interview. And first of all, before we get started, I just wanted to say it's great to have you here, Blake, and thanks for coming on.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, for sure. So we have a couple questions for you, Blake, but first I wanted to go ahead and congratulate you on an impressive college career. And that career was, of course, capped off the national championship, so congrats for that as well.
Thank you so much. It's been a cool year. A lot of hard work is paying off, and it's cool to see the fruits of our labor.
Yeah, for sure. So my first question or topic or whatever you consider it really, I don't know if you remember being interviewed by a lot of people during Senior Bowl week, but I was there. I was the shaky kid with the LSU phone wallpaper. Thoughts on that?
I loved it. I loved it. You came up after practice, right?
I did, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, that was one of our most listened to episodes so far. We had you and a couple other guys on there. I interviewed Boyd Cushenberry as well, one of your teammates. We didn't get his audio, but I had a couple answers for him. We kind of talked about that a little bit. But, one of our most listened to episodes for sure.
Awesome.
Yeah. So another question regarding me at the Senior Bowl. So I got credentials for this, and I don't really know how. And I know as soon as I got credentials, I forgot how to act. So hypothetically, if a journalist was walking around hitting guys in the shoulder pads after the game, just yelling, "Hell of a game, Blake," for instance, how would you react to that? Because definitely wasn't me, but if somebody did.
I would appreciate it, I guess. But, there's a lot going on after those games, so it's a little bit hectic, but appreciate it, no doubt.
Yeah, man.
Well, how you doing, Blake? And so I guess my question would be more about this LSU team this season. And, you hear on ESPN and all these other analysts, and they point to two people all the time about Joe Burrow and Joe Brady, and they give them all the credit for the success of this LSU team. But to you, being inside the locker room, what was really different about this LSU team? Because I don't think all the credit can be given to just two players.
Yeah, it's like I said earlier, it's a culmination of a lot of hard work just on everybody's part, paying off. And, it was truly a team effort this year. We talk about this is arguably one of the greatest teams to ever exist in college football. And so, got to give Coach O a lot of credit because he put this team together. He recruited every single player on this team. And, I think this is a year to be proud of because we achieved so much as a team, first and foremost, and then the individual honors beyond that are just a cherry on top.
Right. I mean, for sure. I mean, I think we talked about on the podcast that, this LSU team has to be in the conversation for one of the best teams ever in college football. And, so outside of the national championship, you've been at LSU for, 4 or 5 years. What is your most memorable college moment outside of winning the national championship this year?
I think probably beating Auburn in Jordan-Hare last year when we had the game-winning field goal with Cole Tracy. That's probably one of my most exciting moments in my time at LSU. And then probably also when we beat Georgia at home, being from Georgia, I had that game, marked on my calendar from the time that I committed to go to school there. And so that was one that really meant a lot to me. And, I was super excited about that game. And then to beat them the way that we did, and then the fans rushed the field, it just made it so much better.
Oh, yeah. And that LSU Auburn game was insane. I'm an Auburn graduate, so it kind of broke my heart. So I appreciate you guys ruining my day on that one. That was one of the best games I can remember. But the LSU Auburn games
that's 2 years.
Always...
That's 2 years in a row that we won the game on some field goals. 2017 with Connor Culp, and then Cole Tracy in 2018. So.
Yes. I was at the game in 2016 on the last second play that was reviewed for, it seemed like an hour and a half. It felt like on the last second touchdown, that insane game.
That was one of the most heartbreaking games in my career. Between that one and the Texas A&M game last year, those were two incredibly tough losses. But, Auburn is always one of the better teams that we play against at LSU, and I got to give them a lot of credit because Gus Malzahn does an incredible job always having them prepared to play us.
Oh, yeah. So, I mean, that actually was a perfect segue into my next question. So, I mean, I guess outside of those two games, is there another game that you wish you could – if you could play it again right now, what's one game you wish you could have back during your time at LSU?
Probably the 29-0 loss to Alabama last year.
Yeah.
That one hurt.
Yeah.
But, any loss you want to always go back and hindsight's 2020. You can always see on film what you can improve on and what you can do better. But you live and you learn, and you. I heard a quote one time where it talks about you either win or you learn, and so you take those opportunities to learn from your mistakes as a team and as an individual and move on. Yeah,
absolutely. So you mentioned something about marking that Georgia game down on your calendar. I know that you're from, I don't want to say the Atlanta area, but you're from North Georgia. And you and your brother both played for LSU in college. So can you speak on what your deciding factors were on deciding to go to Baton Rouge for college as opposed to maybe a school in Georgia or somewhere a little bit closer to home?
Yeah. So, as long snappers, it's typically about timing when it comes to earning scholarships to play at the collegiate level. The long snapper position and even punters and kickers, it's all about timing and who needs a snapper when. And LSU was one of the teams that when my older brother was coming through, they were one of the ones that needed a snapper the year that he was coming out. And
right.
So they were one of the first ones that started recruiting him. He went to a couple of camps at LSU early on and got to know the coaching staff real well, got to know Coach Miles real well. And, when they offered him, he was always kind of comparing everywhere else that he visited back to LSU. And so he knew that he needed to be in Baton Rouge. And then for me, I was going to Reed's games and watching him play and enjoying Saturday nights in Death Valley. And, I fell in love with it as well. When I took my visits, I was always comparing it back to Baton Rouge. And, there's a lot to love about LSU, and, I couldn't stay away. So that was probably one of the ways that we kind of fell in love with the school and the city of Baton Rouge as well.
Right. It's definitely an electric atmosphere. I mean, it's kind of hard for me to be unbiased in saying this. I'm an LSU fan. Zach, like you said, he's an Auburn grad. He's an Auburn fan, but even he can admit that the atmosphere in Baton Rouge is just electric on game days. Yeah. So, and like we said, you mentioned your brother Reed. So obviously you and your brother were both long snappers at LSU, and now he plays for the Bills. Anyway, for the past 5 seasons you've been at LSU, you're entering the draft. Would you agree with all of those people that are calling the Fergusons the royal family of long snappers?
I've heard several names for our family, whether it's the royal family or the first family of long snapping or whatever it is. But we take pride in what we do. I call it a craft or an art that
right.
we have worked so hard to perfect in our years doing what we do. And so when you say that, it makes me proud. And I'm actually sitting here with my dad, and he kind of chuckled as well when you said that. So but it's a, like I said earlier, it's a culmination of a lot of hard work. This sport is not easy, and playing it at the highest level makes it all the more difficult. So just proud to be up there with some of the best.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I mean, that's impressive. I mean, you see a lot of families that turn out, different brothers that all make it to the NFL, and that's awesome that you guys get to experience that. But to kind of move back into your college days, I mean, you played under 2 different head coaches, and can you kind of speak on the difference of playing and being a player under Les Miles versus Coach O, this year?
Yeah, it's Coach Miles always will hold a special place in my heart because he recruited both myself and my brother, and I love Coach Miles dearly, and I have a lot of respect for him and the way that he approached the game. So, but I think the difference, I guess, between the two in their coaching styles, Coach Miles is a little more laid back. He's kind of quirky. He's unique. And I think Coach O is more gruff. He's gritty. He's intense. And, they both love their players like sons. And that was something that drew me to both of them. And, I have a lot of respect for both of them and the way that they approach the game.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I'm currently going to Kansas State, so I got to see, Les Miles this year, coach a little bit in Kansas when we went over there to play them. But, to go back to your recruiting, you said Les Miles was, recruited you and your brother. I mean, National Signing Day is coming up this next week, and I mean, you kind of mentioned it, but can you speak a little bit deeper on just your personal recruiting experience and what was your experience like compared to maybe some other players, and what other schools, I know you said Georgia, what other schools really were catching your eye outside of LSU, and what was the ultimate deciding factor in choosing LSU?
Yeah. So, with long snappers, it's a little bit of an unorthodox position in that you kind of have to recruit yourself to the schools that you want to go to. You don't have the stats, you don't have the highlight reels to get you on the radar of college coaches. So you have to really do that work on your own end. In high school, I was sending emails to different college coaches with my game film and just saying, hey, looking for an opportunity. I was the number one snapper in the country at the time. And I mean, I was still having to recruit myself for the top schools in the country. I knew that I wanted to play SEC football. I knew I wanted to play big time college football. And so that was something that I had to do. And, it just so worked out that my older brother would be finishing when I would be coming in, and I was able to redshirt a year under him, which gave me a lot of, confidence and just trust that I can play at this level. And I got to see it firsthand before I actually stepped on the field, being able to redshirt that year. So that was a pretty important factor to me in my recruiting process. That was very valuable in my mind when I was making my decision. But like I said earlier, when I was going on the different visits, I visited most of the SEC schools. I also visited out in Oregon. I visited Stanford. And, I was, like I said earlier, I was always comparing it back to LSU. And so that was kind of when I knew I needed to shut my recruitment down and I needed to be in Baton Rouge. And I was offered by LSU going into my junior year of high school. It was one of their summer football camps that they had for specialists only. They offered me following that camp. And I committed in September of that year, right before the Auburn game, actually. A lot of Auburn connections in this conversation. But
right.
So I committed in September of my junior year, which is early for long snappers, because a lot of guys, a lot of teams, they won't offer a long snapper until your senior year of high school because they want to see how you develop. They want to see how you grow and get bigger and how you're able to move downfield in coverage. And they want to know what they're getting when they offer you. But LSU, they saw the potential that I had and offered me early and wanted to get in front of the recruitment process because they knew that I would have other opportunities to play. So that kind of is a long story short in terms of my recruitment. But for me, I guess the main schools that recruited me were LSU, and then I also looked at Tennessee and Alabama. Tennessee offered both he offered my brother And then when I was coming through, they were actually – it's funny, the day I committed to LSU, they were going to call and offer me a scholarship. And then they found out that I had committed to LSU, and so they were like, all right, I guess we're not gonna offer this kid. We'll go down the list to the next available. But you know, growing up a Tennessee fan, both my parents having gone to Tennessee, that was a cool experience being recruited by them. But you know, it worked out for me to be in Baton Rouge at LSU, and you know, ended up winning a national championship. So I'm excited.
Yeah, I don't think it could have paid off any bigger than it did this season.
No, absolutely.
So, you know, the NFL draft is coming up. We saw you at the Senior Bowl. And, I mean, what is your biggest goal that you want to achieve during your NFL career? And, I mean, is there any team that you have your eye on? Is there any place that you would prefer? Or are you just looking to get a chance and looking to prove that you're going to be one of the best long snappers in the league?
So yeah, I have a lot of goals for myself. I kind of infamously write my goals on my mirror in my bathroom so that I see them every day when I am in there brushing my teeth or taking a shower or whatever. I can always see those and be reminded of them. But one of the main goals that I have is to win a Super Bowl. You know, I won a national championship with my teammates, and you know, this is a team game that we play, so I'm not necessarily worried about individual awards or anything like that. But I do want to win a Super Bowl because that's something that I've admired since I was young. I watched guys like Peyton Manning win a Super Bowl. I watched guys like Drew Brees win a Super Bowl, and so that's something that I've always wanted to do. And then I guess in terms of individual honors, I would like to be the Walter Payton Man of the Year at some point, or at least nominated for that, because that's something that goes beyond just the game of football. It's about the game of life and impacting those through your platform as an athlete and as a football player. And so because community service and reaching out to people off the field means so much to me, that would be incredibly special as well.
Yeah, that would be great. So, and this is kind of recent. I saw on Twitter today, you sent a tweet out. So in the NFL, you're finally going to have a chance to get that paycheck. You're finally going to have a chance to, be paid for what you're doing. We saw that you spoke out again on the topic of student athletes not being able to be paid in the NCAA. We've spoken about that topic here many times, and I'd love to hear your take on the issue.
Student athletes should absolutely be paid.
Yep.
I feel like there's so much money in the sport of football and just college athletics in general that there's no excuse for student athletes to be going home hungry at night or not having gas to put in their car. My brother and I were having a conversation on Twitter today, followed by a couple other folks that we know. And it's just, there's so many opportunities for money to be made. And I'm glad that there's progress being made with the name, image, and likeness rules being changed soon. But I do feel like there's still more opportunity for that to progress.
Right, absolutely.
Right, and I mean, there's people on both sides of the aisle, some who don't think players should be paid and, so forth. And what is the argument that just makes you the angriest, that you don't understand at all, that people argue that college players should still be playing for free? Like, what argument do you just think is the worst that you've heard?
I think one that I get probably the most often would be just, you get a free education and that should be enough for you. And so that one kind of rubs me the wrong way. And I'm not disagreeing with them at all, because I feel like we're very blessed to have what we have and to have been afforded a free education. And I'm very thankful for that. But I also feel like that there's an opportunity for student athletes to make money beyond just the the scholarship that we're afforded, because students in general that don't play sports they have afternoons or time to go and get a job and make money for themselves beyond their school tuition. So student athletes should have that opportunity as well, given that we don't have the time to go out and get a job for ourselves.
Right.
And you see that all the time. I mean, I know the NCAA released that wild commercial about the life of a student athlete, and they got a lot of pushback because of
that was horrible.
I can imagine. But so this will be my last question. I believe Brandon has one more. So many analysts, I think you've seen them, the way too early top 25 polls, and including myself, I have my own doubts. I won't hide from that. So this will probably be the toughest question I'll ask you this whole interview. Is there's a lot of people who are skeptical about LSU continuing their success into the future, calling this team a one and done, and that's due to losing, coaches like Dave Aranda and Joe Brady, and then losing players that like Joe Burrow, Justin Jefferson, yourself. I mean, can you give me and some other doubters a few reasons why we are wrong and why you think this LSU program is going to keep on the trajectory that it's been going in recent years?
Yeah. So, I mean, we have Coach O first and foremost, and that's really all you need. Right. But, I was very impressed with the team that he was able to put together this season. He brought in Joe Burrow, he brought in Joe Brady. He was able to kind of orchestrate everything to be the best season that there's ever been in college football. I heard I think it was Greeny on ESPN said it the other day that you can't argue that this is the best team ever, because you're never going to win that argument. But you can argue that this is the best season ever because there's statistics to back that up. Now, with that being said, we did lose a lot this season. We lost like 8 or 9 juniors and then several seniors that were key pieces to the puzzle, including Joe Burrow. So, I don't want to call it a rebuilding year because I believe in Coach O and I believe in the pieces that he's already brought in with Bo Pelini and the pieces that he already has in his arsenal. But I am excited to see what he's able to put on, because it is going to be a very different looking team. But I'm hopeful that they'll bring back Coach Munoz from Baylor, because he was a vital piece as to why we were so successful last year, and I'm hoping that we can get him back.
Yeah, absolutely. One last question this is the last question of the interview. Blake, at this point, we've all seen the video, or at least our listeners have seen the video. We've seen the video of the LSU team at the White House after you won the national championship this year. And the second that President Trump mentions that you'll have the opportunity to visit the Oval Office, your face just lights up. So what was that experience like for you and for your team overall?
Yeah, that was unreal. I mean, to be able to go down into the West Wing and go into the Oval Office was a once-in-a-lifetime experience, first and foremost. But we were also the only team that has ever gone down into the Oval Office.
Oh, wow. I didn't realize
No football team, no team visiting the White House has ever gone down there. Wow. And so for President Trump to just allow us to do that was so meaningful to me, and that was why I was so excited to do that, and my facial expression showed it. But it was, that whole experience itself was surreal. My mom was asking me before we even won the national championship, she was saying, what are you most excited about for when you win the national championship? And I'm not worried about the ring. I'm not worried about kissing the trophy. I was excited to see the White House, because that was what I saw on SportsCenter growing up. The Lakers and the Celtics and the Colts, when they won the Super Bowl, going to the White House and meeting the president. Right. And that was one of probably the thing that I was most excited about, was that trip just in general, to see the White House, much less meet the president. And I was hoping that we would have McDonald's and Chick-fil-A for our meal there, but the Oval Office made up for it. So.
Oh yeah, I'm sure. Well, awesome. Once again, thanks for coming on, Blake. It's great to have you, and we really appreciate the interview.
Yeah, absolutely. I do have one thing that I want to mention. Brandon, your fiance, I believe.
Yes.
Was the one that reached out to me to actually get the interview and be on the podcast. She did want me to mention that your wedding gift from her will be LSU season tickets for this fall.
Oh my goodness! Yeah.
She wanted me to make sure that I mentioned that on the interview because she was super excited about that, and I hope you enjoy, and I'll be at a couple games hopefully this fall as well. So, enjoy those and make sure you give her a big hug.
Oh yeah, for sure. Well, thank you, and go Tigers.
Go Tigers.